was going to skip our next topic. However, I kind of want to just touch on it because we did address it earlier. I did promise we were going to talk about it. Obviously there's been a bunch of other coins and platforms and everything that have collapsed lately. And Luna was one of them, right? I won't get into it because obviously I want to kind of address it from like one key point that everyone's talking about Ponzi scheme, right? Now, Erin, you actually mentioned that in talking about the values and everything like that, and the fact that someone only gets paid because someone else, you are that, what did you say? You're that value.
If you don't know where the yield is coming from, you are the yield.
That's it. I like that. I think that speaks across all leadership platforms, no matter where you are, right? If you don't know where the yield is coming from, you are the yield. I love that. So
I love that. If ever I write a book on investment, I'm going to quote that on the very first page.
I love it. So obviously there's all this difference between stable coins and coins, blah, 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 like there's let's not get into that. But obviously a lot of crypto stuff is either labeled a rug pull or a Ponzi scheme, right? And I don't think what I can see with SBF and what happened with FTX, that I couldn't see that was a Ponzi scheme or even a rug pull. I think that was just bad management, as you know, and like bad business practices. No?
You could, it depends on your definition, but you could, because what was happening was that people were depositing funds onto the exchange. Those funds were then being used by Alameda to trade and earn obviously earn a return for Alameda customers. So It may not have been like a straight Ponzi, but I don't know that there was too much of a difference because those obviously Alameda was directly attached to FTX. So in a sense,
isn't the point that people's funds were being used without their knowledge?
Yeah,
that's fundamentally that's the value issue that I have with it. That people's funds were being used without their knowledge.
Yeah,
and therefore they weren't aware of the potential risks involved.
They had a company policy that said it wouldn't be your funds wouldn't be touched. That was part of the contract, right?
Yeah.
Well,
and
there you go.
I guess a situation that was just as bad in that people believed that they were purchasing Bitcoin, but it didn't exist. So these cryptocurrencies that people were owed after the collapse, they were never there. They were just literally pretending that they had the Bitcoin, but they didn't have it. So there were things like that as well, were just completely fraudulent. So maybe Ponzi is the wrong word, but sometimes it's like the line is not that clear what separates it from a Ponzi.
Ponzi schemes then, because I do actually want to specifically talk about this because it's a word that gets thrown around in the crypto world a lot, but also I think that it's an almost overused term now. Anything that someone doesn't understand, they call it a Ponzi scheme or whatever. The Ponzi scheme is only an issue for the person at the. How do I say this? For a Ponzi scheme to work, it needs suckers, right?
Yeah.
Like if there's no one buying into it, then it doesn't grow and it doesn't.
You need a fraudulent business case, basically. So, I think if you think of like the scheme that gave it its name, right? So that dude, his name was Ponzi, right?
Ponzi,
and he was running this thing with stamps, I believe it was, back in 19 whatever. Sorry, I should know this more specifically. But he said that essentially he was in some way creating a return on their investment through the buying and selling of these stamps or stamp futures or something like that. But what he was doing was the stamps were never involved. He was just taking funds from the next investor and paying off the old investors.
Well, what happened was at the start, it was a real investment. So there were your mail bonds, right, which are just pretty much stamps. Like you go it's pretty much go to the post office, buy a box of stamps for $1 each, and then sell them to someone else for $1.10 each or whatever. That's pretty much what he was doing. I'm pretty sure he was in America, and he was selling them to people to invest back in the United States. And it was genuine at the start. But then because everyone was making so much money from it, there weren't enough stamps to go around. And so he was, in the end, just because everyone wanted into it, the new people that were buying in, he was taking their funds to then pay off the old investors. And that's kind of how it flowed. Yeah.
So it turned into a Ponzi. Okay, so I always thought it basically was that from the beginning, but effectively, I guess greed got the better of him or whatever, and he started breaking rules and laws, and that's when it happened. Okay.
Yeah. From a psychology point of view, how do we stop from getting caught up in a Ponzi?
I think the first thing is to be aware of your own greed. And your own propensity towards greed. Like I think it's that kind of human condition stuff, in that we have a weak spot when it comes to fast returns and lots of money, right? Like it's a very easy mechanism to be exploited in humans. So I think you've got to be aware of your own vulnerability and weakness when it comes to money, and the fact that means your judgment may be impaired when you are actually thinking about investing in something. And so I think you need to really have some safeguards in place personally with yourself, whether that's accountability with partner, friends or family, whether that's simply that you have a rule with yourself that you will pause and, not allow yourself to invest in something until you've done at least, X amount of research or X amount of time has passed. To me, it's about that kind of self-regulation stuff, the knowledge of your own greed. Aside from the fact that, there are people who want to take advantage of this stuff and who, may be willing to sell you snake oil. It's difficult for us to kind of control what other people are doing. But if we are thinking about our own propensity towards greed and the fact that we're likely to make mistakes around, getting rich, I think that's a good starting point.
That's good. Dr. Rod, as the business pastor, what advice would you give to business owners? Because, obviously, it's our responsibility as business owners to build wealth. It's our responsibility to see increase in our business. How do we, as leaders, try to, going on what Erin was talking about, trying to chase wealth, how do we find that balance between creating genuine wealth and then chasing get-rich-quick schemes?
Okay. First thing I would say is read the book of Proverbs and highlight every reference to diligence and every reference to indolence. I'm going to say something which could be quite controversial here and will upset a lot of Christians, no doubt.
Go for it.
I don't believe in passive income.
Comment below about what Dr. Rod's about to say now.
Look, in evangelical and Pentecostal circles, there's been this idea that we need to build up passive income. I actually don't see that in the Bible. Deuteronomy 8:18 lays out the principle, I have given your arm strength to get wealth. And then all through Proverbs, we talk about the reward comes to the diligent. So if you want to build wealth, I think you need to commit yourself to diligence. That is, to work hard with the gifts and the talents and the resources that God has given you.
Really
and
good.
At the same time, of course, as you're reading through Proverbs, bear in mind the parable of the talents. Okay, because I think that has application here as well. Now, back in the old days when I first heard about passive income in church circles, it was all about making it possible for you to sit back with your feet up and watch the money roll in. I actually don't think that's a biblical principle at all.
God created us to work.
This is not to say you should never own shares or never get involved in cryptocurrencies, etc. I believe prophetically that these markets are one means by which the wealth of the wicked or the sinner has been stored up for the use of the righteous. I actually like what it says in the amplified version of the Bible, and I've actually written it down, so let me read it.
Go for it.
This is Proverbs 13:22, and I've actually preached on this not all that long ago. This is from the Amplified Bible, not the Amplified Classical Edition, as it's now called, but the more recent version. A good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. That's the first half of this verse. The second half is, and the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the hands of the righteous. Now, now the hands of is not in the original. That's been added by the translators of the Amplified Bible. But whenever hands are referred to in the Old Testament in particular, but there are a couple of references in the New Testament, it's always to work. We build wealth through work. Now, that work is not necessarily physical work. That work is research as well. So if you're involved in investment in digital assets, you're not going to be literally digging with your hands or anything like that. You'll be working by doing a lot of research. Most of it will be online, but also seek input of others who perhaps have operated in this area. Go talk to a Christian financial planner. Go and talk to someone like Erin, who knows about this and has had some experience. That's what I mean by diligence or by hard work in this area. The idea that any income should be passive, I actually think is contrary to the principle set out in the Word of God. Now, I have an asset portfolio. I work with a financial planner. I pay that financial planner, and I'm happy to do so because I'm absolutely certain that through his diligence and me taking his advice, my portfolio is at least $300,000 or $400,000 bigger than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by being diligent and engaging in work. It's not always physical work, but it's, applying the gift that God has given you between the ears and by listening to other people before you make a choice. So I'm not against investment in real estate, in digital assets, in shares, and I am involved, of course, in stocks and shares myself, but with advice, and I pay for that advice, and I'm happy to do so. And also I earn income, and you can leverage that income often through wise investments.
Yeah.
And to people in business, there are two things you should do with your income. One is live well, live generously on it. So take a leaf out of Wesley's book. Wesley said, in terms of money, gain all you can, save all you can after being generous to your household and yourself, then give all you can. I think they're great principles. You gain all you can through diligent work. You save all you can through being generous with your own sort of inner circle, and then you give away the rest, basically.
Yeah.
That's why God has given you the power or the strength to get wealth. So if you're in business, look at the income stream. One, to provide a means of generous living for yourself, your household, support your church, and so on and so forth, and tithe out of that. I would always recommend that you tithe, or in fact go beyond the tithe, but that's a topic for another day. But also use that income. You can leverage a real estate portfolio, a share portfolio, a portfolio that includes digital assets and so on, so that if your business actually falls upon hard times at some point in the future, you don't also fall upon hard times.
That's good. So to avoid a Ponzi scheme, or avoid being a Ponzi scheme, really, like, let's not chase after quick, get rich quick schemes. The Bible speaks against that. Because, I mean, look, it always falls apart in the end, as we see. Crypto is a great, not going to say whether it's good or bad investment. If you look over time, it's a better investment than if you're looking at it in a short term. You're not If you're just trying to get in there to make a quick buck, it's not going to work for you. No investment is going to work for you. And as Dr. Rod said, be diligent. Be diligent with your work, with the skills and gifts that God has given you, and add value to your community, add value to other people, solve problems for people so you can build wealth as well, because that's how God has called you to build wealth. And hey, if you can look around you, and Erin, give us that quote again.
If you don't know where the yield is coming from, you are the yield.
Remember that. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.